It's an interesting thought, fibre to the home. It has sort of been a buzzword recently. We know that various African countries have embarked on this. We know that we are very much behind in South Africa. Let's start off with you, Angus. What does it actually mean, fibre to the home? Is it only about reliability and speed?
Yeah. I think, well, let's start with fibre as a whole.
Yeah.
Fibre is an essential part of any telecoms network today. So if you look at anyone in the telecoms market today, the way to get the maximum speed, the maximum performance, the maximum reliability is to use optical fibre. So all telcos use optical fibre in their backbone networks. Internationally, the globe is connected together by submarine optical fibre cables. The challenge is, can we take that same technology and extend it out to homes so that you can get the maximum performance on broadband internet connections? And in a number of countries, that's certainly starting to happen. But as you say, there's a balance to be struck between the cost of deploying that fibre and the performance and the quality you can get out of it.
Aidan, let's get your sense. I mean, given the fact that you are at Seacom, clearly fibre is a massive element in which we're looking at. In terms of fibre to the home, when you hear things like that, rhetoric like that coming out, do you think that it can be done in the South African model?
I think it's a good question. My initial reaction is no. I don't think you can get fibre to every home in South Africa or anywhere in Africa for that matter. I think fibre plays a critical role of getting close to the homes, connecting the base stations if you're the mobile operators. But I think getting fibre into every home is a dream. And I think it's a wonderful ideal, but I think what we need to look at is other viable technologies that can help bring connectivity to people's homes, looking at some of the fixed mobile technologies and wireless technologies.
The truth of the matter is, in South Africa, Raj, we are very reliant on Telkom's local loop. That is really the scenario that is playing out, and we know that it is a copper line that we're relying on. Let's get your sense with regards to fibre and whether you think we could make headway.
Well, fibre really is the most best form of transmission from a bandwidth perspective. It offers the highest bandwidth speeds, capacity, as well as reliability. So no doubt the move towards fibre by any telco should be commended. Now, the reliance on the copper network, which is aging, is subject to cable theft and has inherent latencies that prevent high speeds, and the move to fibre allows South Africans to really benefit from broadband connectivity at competitive pricing. And I think those type of initiatives should be lauded.
Okay, you mentioned aging. The Telkom copper line is aging. We know that maintenance should be done relatively soon. We've also got the big question mark over local loop unbundling. Angus, in your mind, do you think that we could perhaps see a change in strategy from Telkom and say, well, let's try and replace copper with fibre?
Yeah. Look, I think there's no doubt that any telco is going to try to move towards the latest technology. I think the challenge that an incumbent has, like a Telkom, for example, is that they have a very, very large base of existing services on copper. And so there's nowhere in the world that any incumbent has completely shifted away from the existing infrastructure. So yes, we would certainly support, frankly, the country needs more deployment of fibre.
But could you use both at the same time, copper and fibre?
The position we take, for example, on local loop unbundling is that we feel that local loop unbundling needs to happen in South Africa. It's one of those critical interventions that will get, if you like, the last line or the last bastion of the monopoly out of the way. But in the process, you also need to look at the way in which that business model is structured. And in a number of countries, what's happened is the incumbent operators themselves have been unbundled into separate operators, where you have a local loop player. Some examples there would be something like the UK, BT Openreach. There's a big experiment going on in Australia where they've actually separated out the company completely into a thing called the National Broadband Network, which then not only deploys copper, but also will then start to develop and deploy the new technologies as fibre. So I think there are various ways to address this. I wouldn't altogether agree with Aidan that it's that we'll never see fibre to the home. Absolutely, we, in terms of our deployment, think we will eventually get to the point of being able to do fibre to the home, but we've got to mix that with unbundled local loop.
You're talking about it just being a dream in South Africa. Yeah. What if Telkom comes to the fore and replaces, every time they need to do maintenance or replace lines, they just replace it with fibre?
I think the reality here is that Telkom have around 4 million copper lines going into homes in South Africa. We have a population of 50 million. So when you say fibre to the home, maybe technically it depends how you define a home. When I'm talking fibre to every person and to everyone's homes. And I don't think that is reality. I don't think it's necessarily feasible. I think there might be better investments for money at that stage from the major operators. But I do think there is scope, and I think it's important that we try to get fibre as close to areas as possible. I'm just saying that ultimate distribution, that last mile, fibre is not feasible for the more rural or disparate areas in the country.
So Raj, I mean, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa speaking about broadband overall in the country and saying that fibre to the home is a very viable option. In the backdrop of all of this, we also have i3 Africa, which recently has come to the fore and plans to build fibre to the home networks in the country, connecting, they say, 2.5 million homes in the country. Do you think that that could be a reality? I mean, if Giokos is coming out and saying it can be done, do you think that's the way to go?
Look, I think the basic question comes at what cost are they going to be able to deploy it, and is the average consumer able to afford that? Now, what we are seeing is, from a corporate perspective, certainly the demand of fibre transmission is increasing. And this comes from things like cloud computing, disaster recovery, and the use of internet to get access to IT services. There's a tight correlation between cloud computing type services and bandwidth. When the price of bandwidth goes down, use of cloud computing services increases. So certainly from a corporate perspective, we see there's no doubt that business model is applicable. When it comes down to consumers, quite frankly, although there is significant demand from things like access to getting access to videos, which have high bandwidth requirements, there's still not enough of a demand to justify even spending 10, 20,000 rands to get set up for each home.
That's a fascinating point. Angus, i3 Group, which plans to have quite a big stake in i3 Africa. And i3 Group actually rolled out fibre networks in the likes of the UK, Australia, New Zealand and the US. And you're talking about the UK and Australia having very interesting models with regards to local loop unbundling. How do you tie all of this in together?
Okay. I think, firstly, just a comment offhand around the i3 Group. I think the jury is still out as to how successful they may or may not have been. So if you look at the various deployments around the world, there are a number of companies around the world that have deployed fibre to the home. i3 has not been one of the more successful ones. There are much more successful deployments by some of the challengers in the European market. Certainly the government-led initiatives in the Far East. So there have been quite a lot of big deployments of fibre to the home. But I think the challenge we face in South Africa is more one of geography. So i3 has a particular approach of using the sewers to get to houses and so on. Now that may well be true, but we still have houses that are hundreds of meters apart. Whereas, for example, in Hong Kong,
we're not as densely populated as a lot of these regions.
So fibre to the home, when you have a building with 10,000 people in it, is easy. Fibre to the home, when you have to go house to house to house over many, many kilometres, is a huge challenge.
Absolutely.
It's a fundamental cost challenge.
Neotel, I can see that you're saying it's a huge challenge because, with regards to what you at Neotel are up to, I'm sure it has.
We've got fibre to the curb in the major metros. We've got 5,000 kilometres of fibre, which runs right outside pretty much every major office area in the country, and that we're using to deliver primarily business services. But just that last bit of getting into the buildings or getting into residential premises, that's the part where we still would need to see a viable business case.
10,000 rand a home is what they say it'll cost, and they say that in terms of a recovery of cost, you could charge each home 350 rand per month for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, those are the raw numbers, but I think the thing you need to look at is the ratio of how many homes do you go past with your fibre and how many homes actually buy the service, because that determines whether it's viable. And just to take that number, 10,000 may be the number, it may be 15, whatever the number may be, but there needs to be a smarter way to deal with that from an investment point of view. And one of the things we've been tracking is a concept that a couple of guys at Google came up with a couple of years back called Homes with Tails, where you actually move the investment away from just a pure national telco, for example, into the home investor actually building some of that infrastructure or paying for some of that infrastructure. And we think that might be a more viable way to go.
So Seacom is a very exciting thing for the whole African continent. With regards to wireless options as well, you were talking about other options that we could look at, and it's not only about fibre. How do you see fibre and wireless and perhaps satellite internet, so internet via satellite, perhaps playing a symbiotic relationship and see synergies between those three elements?
Yeah, I think we often speak about satellite versus fibre, and it's always sort of one or the other, and how fibre is sort of eroding satellite share. I agree with you. I think there's huge scope for the three to coexist if you include wireless as a medium for the last mile. If you look at something like New Dawn, it's a satellite that's due to launch shortly. They play a huge role in connecting sort of large areas across the country where fibre isn't necessarily available, especially in parts of Africa that don't have the luxury of fibre links connecting Cape Town and Joburg, such as we have in South Africa. So that would be an example where satellite plays a role. Satellite would then connect into a Seacom or an equivalent submarine cable to carry that capacity or fetch that capacity from Europe and the US. So that's sort of the two of them. In terms of fibre to the home and the last mile discussion, you just need to look at someone like Cell C's latest campaign and their new network that they've rolled out. It's really questioning the business case. $3.99 a month. And Cell C now, I think it's $1.99 a month. You can have up to 6 gigs of high-speed bandwidth. Now, I'm not saying that it's a viable alternative for fibre going forward, because we all know the challenges that come with rolling out mobile GSM networks and how much capacity you can really carry. But I think it's a great and effective way of carrying capacity affordably to those people who may have a phone but may not have a home with close to anywhere there's fibre deployment.
Okay, well, let's look outside of South Africa. The truth of the matter is we've seen other countries deploying fibre to the home. So in other words, we are actually relatively behind, when you look at the likes of Kenya. And some of the models, when you look at these countries that are starting to deploy fibre, it seems that it's bringing down the cost of internet significantly, the cost of broadband significantly. Could you see that playing out in South Africa, Raj?
Yes, absolutely. Well, but in terms of lowering the bandwidth costs, I mean, there are 3 components. There's an international component, which organizations like Seacom and Easy and WEX are addressing. There's the national long-haul component, getting it from the coastline back to the major hubs. Those projects are such as the National Long Distance Fibre Route, FibreCo, which Internet Solutions is involved in. But then there's the question of the last mile, and whether the last mile is done through fibre or is done through wireless. That component currently is the biggest challenge that faces South Africa. To get to every single consumer, be it a corporate or an average citizen, is the challenge. Certain countries such as Kenya and others have an advantage that they don't have much infrastructure in place already. So when they are getting into the game already, they can go with what the latest is available. In many countries, including South Africa, there's already something in place. There's pricing models already in place. It's difficult to come up with a new business model completely and radically change the pricing levels. And that's what we're seeing in Kenya versus South Africa, where in Kenya the prices have dropped tremendously. In South Africa, they're still remaining quite high.
Fantastic. On that note, we're going to a very short break. More on connectivity through fibre when we come back. Stay tuned.